see so many familiar faces. We're going to get started with quick intros, and I will start. I'm Sally Miller, co-founder and CEO of Womaness, and Womaness is really all about modernizing healthy aging with a particular focus on menopause, products, community, and information.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jessica Shepard. I'm a gynecologist right up the street in Dallas. And I have a practice, Sanctum Med and Wellness, but I'm also the founder of Modern Meno, which is really looking at the lifestyle and sustainability of women in their midlife transition. And so I'm so excited to be here today in order to share exactly what I share with my patients in an exam room, and that we can really have a longevity and sustainability if we put the work to it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I am author of the book Forever Strong, New York Times bestseller. We did it. And founder of muscle-centric medicine. So it's a new form of medicine that focuses on skeletal muscle as the organ of longevity.
And I'm Antonietta. I'm the Chief Training Officer of PVolve. PVolve is a functional fitness-based method. We pair resistance-based equipment with movements to help increase strength, mobility, stability, and overall quality of life.
Great. So Dr. Shepard, I would love for you to just kind of set the stage here and really give us the 101 of muscle health.
Yeah, muscle health, which often is underestimated because we don't typically focus on our muscles. When we're thinking about women's health, a lot of us spend so much time thinking about the pelvis and reproductive organs, but muscle really is kind of the key organ when we think of longevity. And so now we're coming into this phase when we think of aging and also menopause, which I kind of look at as two different pillars, but they have a lot of overlap, is that there is a triggering amount of decline in skeletal muscle, and muscle, which we'll go through with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon here, is exactly what we need to focus on a little bit more as we start to age, and not really looking at aging as something that is catastrophic, but really how we can embrace aging and find some ways for muscle to be a very big part of that aging process in order for us to show up better for ourselves when we're in our 70s, 80s, and even into our 90s.
Great. So Dr. Lyon, talk to us about why it's so important to pay attention to our muscle health.
Certainly. Well, first of all, weakness is never a strength. Weakness is never a strength. Skeletal muscle is everything. And I would argue that these diseases of aging that we see, like obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, these are diseases of skeletal muscle first that begin decades earlier. If you care about your health and wellness, then the reality is you have to be strong. Full stop. And I would say that we have really made a mistake on what we focused on. Everybody's heard, how many people think that there's an obesity epidemic? Every single person in this room. But what if I told you that obesity is just a symptom of unhealthy muscle? Then the real epidemic would be a midlife muscle crisis. We have to address that first.
Can you also talk about bone health in relation to muscle health?
You know, bone health we've all heard about is aging, osteoporosis, osteopenia. Low muscle mass and arguably decreased strength is going to be your first sign. And that can be fixable by being strong and training early on. And I'm talking about real focused training. I am not talking about, it's not about clocking in the hours. And this might make some people a little uncomfortable because, by the way, Zone 2 is having its moment right now, is it not? For any coaches or trainers in this room, Zone 2 is like the new it thing. But you cannot ignore that strength is everything, and that includes resistance training. So if you care about bone health, then you have to care about being strong. It's not just about vanity. I mean, being jacked and tan is good, but is secondary. Truly, muscle has to be looked at as an organ system because it is an organ system in and of itself. Just like you think about the cardiovascular system, just like you think about the reproductive system, skeletal muscle is in and of itself the largest organ system, not skin.
Makes sense. Antonietta, PVOLV just conducted a study that revealed how critical functional movement is for longevity. Can you talk to us about the findings of this study?
Absolutely. So I would be honored to share the research, but first let's all ground ourselves in this statistic. 6% of sports science research is conducted on women. You heard that right, 6%. Wow. So there's obviously a gap in research studying women. And we know why this is, right? Our physiology is more complicated. It's ever changing. When you think of the arc of a woman's life, from her first menstruation to potentially the reproductive years to pre and post menopause, we see these wild changes in hormones, right? Daily, certainly monthly, and then following our life stages. So we wanted to take a small part and address the gap in research. We studied women aged 40 to 60, starting in the menopause transition, and they went through 12 weeks of supervised PVOLV workouts, 12 weeks at 4 times a week, against a control group that went through 150 minutes of exercise, right? The common 150 minutes of cardiovascular exercise. Things like jogging, walking, riding a bike, and other forms of exercise. And I'm so proud to share that the PVOLV participants, they gained around 20% more lower body mass and strength, 10% greater overall stability, 21% increases in flexibility. They lowered their blood lipids. They increased lean muscle mass without weight gain. And these were all conducted on objective measurements at the University of Exeter, which is one of the leading sports science research centers in the world. We also looked at subjective measurements, validated subjective measurements, and the participants gained 23% more energy. They decreased fatigue by 23%. They had overall more enjoyment of exercise and overall greater quality of life. So we know functional movement works.
Yeah. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. Remind us the length of time.
So it was 12 weeks, 12 supervised weeks, and they went through 4 PVOLV workouts per week.
That's not very long.
It's not very long at all.
Remarkable. Mm-hmm. Great results.
And do you mind if I talk about functional movement? Because I don't know if everybody knows what functional movement is.
Go ahead.
Great. So functional movement is movements that you do in your everyday life. So you can think bending down to pick something up, sitting, standing, reaching, rotating, right? We call that standing abdominal work, like looking back to look at your kid in the backseat of a car. And it's not just these functional movements, it's getting to know how to do the movements well. I always say it's not what you're doing, but it's how you're doing what you're doing that's gonna help you go, the long term. So functional movements, are mimicking everyday movements. You're building body awareness. So when you're not thinking about those activities, you reflexively are moving better. And the other thing about functional movement that's so important is that we live in a world where the world is moving all around us, right? But when you think about a lot of exercise, it's stationary and it's repetitive. So that can lead to overuse, right? It can lead to predominantly strengthening certain muscles, but then having other muscles that are underutilized. So we need to think about moving in all planes of motion, right? We need to think about moving and strengthening in 360 degrees. That's going to help keep your joints, talking about joint health, musculoskeletal connection, your joints supple, your joints mobile. It's going to help with stability, right? You're moving in ways, you're having to manage shifting weight from 2 legs to 1, increasing stability overall. So it is definitely building muscle, but for me and for PVOLV, it's building muscle through functional movements that's really going to help you, move well long-term and kind of future-proof your movement.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Shepard, you're a menopause expert. Can you just talk about the menopause transition and the impact on mobility and obviously muscle health?
Yeah, I really love the feature of estrogen and really looking at it as such a phenomenal part of every woman in here. And so when we lose estrogen, we start to see that decline in estrogen over a course of years. It's never overnight that all of a sudden your deposits of estrogen are just completely gone. But this is why we're looking at menopause and perimenopause specifically on how we can utilize our bodies, how we can utilize how we nourish our bodies and how we move our bodies to help offset that decline over the course of anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So estrogen is kind of like this fuel that our body really depends on, not only how we feel, how we look, but also how our body functions. So our bodies are machines, right? Everything depends on each other in order to function. And so when estrogen takes a hit and you start to see a decline in estrogen, our muscle is a big part of that decline. And so we have estrogen receptors all over our body. And that's really why I love educating about perimenopause and menopause, is because we really seem to focus on it only from the reproductive side of now someone doesn't have any more cycles or now they're not bleeding. But what really takes the hit as well is your muscle. And so we know that muscle is an excellent utilizer of glucose. And when we were talking about disease processes in our body when we're getting older, whether that's dementia, whether that's osteoporosis or cardiovascular health, a lot of that has to do with how our body's functioning, but also how much glucose is able to be utilized for the rest of our body. So sarcopenia, which is a very fancy name for just decrease in lean muscle mass, starts to occur rapidly as we hit that perimenopausal, menopausal phase. So as Dr. Lyons was saying, that it is the largest organ system in our body. So if we lose that power through our muscles and we're not paying attention to it and we're not finding ways to build strength and to build our muscle, that's where we start to see some of these future things that come down the line in morbidity and mortality, with dementia, with osteoporosis, with heart disease, which are probably one of the 3 key things that impact quality of life when we look at women who are aging. So that's why I say that mean muscle machine is such a big part of how we should look at that transition during perimenopause and menopause to offset that decline in estrogen and really give you the utility of how you would like to show up later on in life. And so that's why when we think about building muscle, people get a little bit scared. I think, we're still in this phase where people I think that society has a lot to do with that. We were taught that women do this type of exercise and then men only do this type of exercise, which a lot of it incorporated muscle and muscle building. But now we need to reclaim that and take that back and understand how important muscle is to our longevity.
And is it never too late to start?
It is never too late to do anything.
Everybody
in here, I want you to
motivate.
know, does not matter what age you are, what stage in life that you are, it is never too late to do something new, to impact your life. And I think that investments that we make in our life every single day really gives us that ultimate goal in the end. And so everyone, I want you to commit to yourself, whatever small step that you want to take is to start today. It's never too late.
Take a pledge for that. Dr. Lyon, you are working on ways to measure more precisely the muscle strength, correct? Can you talk about that more?
Well, I think what's really important for you guys to understand is one of the reasons why skeletal muscle has not been focused on is because we don't actually have a great way to measure it. We've got some physicians here, and you guys probably have gotten a DEXA done. Did you know that doesn't actually directly measure skeletal muscle mass? Did everyone know that?
Yeah. I know that from
okay.
what I recall.
But we have to understand it's been underappreciated because it hasn't been easy to test. When you get a DEXA, you're looking at bone density and fat mass. All the rest of the lean mass is extrapolated. And of all the lean mass, maybe 40% would be skeletal muscle. And as we age, you might need a 10% change in skeletal muscle mass specifically for it to show up. So you can appreciate that. I don't know how many of you have tried to build muscle and then you go and you do this scan and nothing shows, but maybe your body fat went down a little bit. We have to appreciate that we don't have the skill set yet that is available on a population level. So the ways in which we do it in research, we do CT or MRI. Not great. How many of you guys have gone and gotten an MRI to figure out how much muscle mass you have? Probably nobody, maybe one person in the back. The more advanced ways that I think that we're going to start to see something called a D3 creatine. So it's a deuterated creatine. It's a tagged creatine. 98% of the body's creatine is in skeletal muscle. These pools turn over quickly. An individual could take a pill and they would test the urine how much skeletal muscle mass an individual has. As we begin to do this, then you'll be able to get a direct skeletal muscle mass measurement. There's two other things that I want to mention. Skeletal muscle, you want it to be healthy because if it's not, it ends up looking like a marbled ribeye steak. Mm-hmm. You ultimately, and everyone's like, I'm not eating steak after that. It's so gross. But when we have fat externally, whether you have visceral fat, fat around the organs, and fat in other places, you can get fat within skeletal muscle. So if an individual says, well, you know, a certain type of person has more skeletal muscle mass, it's really about the quality of the tissue and the health of that tissue. And as we become to be more advanced in our ability to test it, which we're working on, I think we're going to start to see more of the importance emerge. I think we're at a precipice because oftentimes people talk about strength. We've all heard about how important strength is, right? And that mass doesn't really matter. It just matters how strong you are. But that's not true because as Dr. Jessica was saying, skeletal muscle is the largest, it's a metabolic sink. It's your currency. And it's the only currency that you cannot trade, bargain for, Botox for. I mean, I guess you kind of can Botox muscle, but you have to earn it. And as you earn it, what happens to your metabolism is really the key. You know, we talked about cardiovascular disease, we talked about Alzheimer's. These are diseases of metabolic, in large part, of metabolic dysregulation. Metabolism and our metabolic flexibility is really about the health of our skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is the primary site for insulin disposal, and when you exercise, you don't require insulin to use glucose. It is also, people don't realize this, but at rest, fatty acids are our skeletal muscle's primary fuel source. People think about, you go to your doctor and then you think, oh, well, I need a statin. No, you need more muscle because muscle's a primary, it uses fatty acids at rest. It is also a bridge in your immune system. When you contract it, it releases these myokines that interface and lower systemic inflammation. And as you have heard, it is your amino acid reserve. It's your body armor. Build it as much as you can, as early as you can. And as Dr. Shepard said, it's never too late to start. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time to start is today. Yeah.
There's so much that we don't know. So I'm so excited to read your book because there's just, I mean, I think both of you are on the cutting edge here.
It's the next vital sign.
Yeah.
If you're a doctor, there will become a point where you go into the office to see your physician and they will measure your skeletal muscle mass. And they will say, you know what, Sarah, or Michelle, Michelle actually has a ton of skeletal muscle, that you need to put on 3 pounds of muscle in order for us to regulate your blood sugar. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet, but that is where I hope we move to be.
That's right.
Especially with the diabetes.
Yeah.
All of the health issues.
And also something else, and I just have to say this, and these are just some stats for you people over here, is that if 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese, just hang with me here, because you've been sold something that I don't think is true. If 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese, and if diabetes is a fat issue, then how come 70% of Americans don't have diabetes and how come only 12% do? We have a muscle problem, not a body fat problem. Mm-hmm. It is much more dangerous to lose skeletal muscle mass than it is to put on body fat. And I know that's a little controversial.
Antonetta, can you talk about how often we should be doing strength training?
Yes.
Obviously, it's probably an individual regimen, but I think just giving our audience some guidance would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think we spoke a little bit about it, so it's never too early to start. and start with where you're at, right? I think a lot of people make the New Year's resolutions, I'm gonna hit it hard, and they create unsustainable programs. So starting small, building your routine progressively from there. Ultimately, you wanna work up to about 3, 4, 5, whatever you can manage. I know, in the menopause transition, you're often managing kids, maybe elderly parents, right? There's a lot going on. So if we can get somewhere between 3 to 5 strength training sessions per week, you're really setting yourself up for success. But it's all about setting yourself up for success from the start, right? So acknowledging where you are, building those small, sustainable steps to eventually get to a place where you're building that lean muscle for all of the reasons that we're mentioning.
So how long are these sessions? An hour or?
Yeah, I think, again, starting with where you're at, right? Movement is important. If it's only 10 minutes per day, get the 10 minutes in. I know a lot of times it's, if I don't have a full hour to get my session in, and if I don't have the 55 minutes to go to the class or the 45 minutes to go to the class, I'm not doing anything, right? So we need to flip that script and just find ways to get movement in, starting small. If on one day all you can hit is 15 minutes, great. Do a 15-minute workout, get outside, walk around the block. But then, of course, you do want to try to get those 3 to 4 sessions of building muscle by doing weight training exercises. And it's amazing how quickly the body adapts. So the question I get asked all the time is, how often should I be scaling up when I'm weight training? When your body starts to plateau, you want to hit muscle failure. So you want to be at the point where you're lifting heavy, you can only get, say, 10, 20 reps in, and your form is out the window, right? We want to take our bodies to that absolute muscle failure, minimal reps, heaviest weight. And I know, talking about, preconceived notions of exercise, that's intimidating for a lot of women, right? We think dance cardio or this or that. All of those exercise routines are great, but that muscle failure is really where we're gonna start to find positive muscle adaptations, and that's what we need to be prioritizing.
I think really, when you look at your lifestyle and how you want to conceptualize, what can I do every day that I can start to build on that? And so it's really getting some fundamental foundations on, I'm gonna conquer this for this month, and then next month I'm going to add to that and build to that. Because this really is a lifestyle. What we're talking about up here is not necessarily want you to accomplish it just for the month of April. We want you to be accomplishing these goals when you're 86, when you're 92, and feeling fabulous as you start to, age. But the aging process is not always kind to us, but we can counteract that with all the tools and the availability that we have with movement and also with diet. And when I say the word diet, I don't mean restrictive. I'm like, what are the things that we can add? What are the things that we can add in a way that makes us happy about how our body looks, how we feel? But aging really does have this kind of I say if we were to write a script on it, it would be like a horror story in Hollywood. And really, I would love that to be a comedic love story in how we are in love with ourselves and our bodies and embracing this aging movement and this moment. And these are the tools that we want to be able to help you start with so that you can build on it. Because everybody's template in here who's sitting here today is going to be very different. But the outcome is really what we're looking for. So taking the time to, if you can do 4 sessions because you have been working out, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone who's only starting at 1 session is less than the person who is doing 4. This is really a marathon, and we want to get you to that end goal really whole. And we want you to do it in a fabulous way that you're happy with what you've accomplished over the amount of years that you've put into it.
Absolutely. I would love for you to talk about nutrition, and I will also have Gabrielle talk about it too, but if you want to just talk about the role of nutrition in all of this as well.
Yeah, nutrition is one of those, I think, those pillars of health that we've neglected for so long. We are also force-fed a lot of different nutritional values that are not necessarily the most healthy for us. And so I think we have to really change the frame of mind of what the word diet means to us, all the different fads that you hear that someone is doing. Does that really cater to you as an individual? And that's why I think that reaching out to experts, whether that's a registered dietitian who understands midlife, and really looking at the protein and where you might be deficient and how you can add that into your diet, including things such as fiber as well. I'm very big about fiber. You'll hear that after this. That's the colon talk after, so you'll hear about fiber there. But I do think that it has to be incremental. I would say that most of the patients who come into my office, when I really talk to them about lifestyle and nutritional value, it's not easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, because that means you have to change what you're reaching for, what's in your fridge, how you grocery shop, how you really understand the grams of protein that you're getting a day, or adding things into that to bolster the workout that now you've also changed because it requires more weight training. So from a nutritional standpoint, there never is like one stamp on something that everyone must follow. But depending on your age, what decade you're in, what you're trying to accomplish, but also looking at lifetime goals, I think that's where you kind of have to build it. But it requires people who are going to understand all of those aspects and then help you implement that into your individual life. Because I think we've done too much damage already with thinking that everyone in this room should be on, whether that's the Atkins, the Mediterranean, like everyone can't follow that diet, but you can find the best tenets out of each diet and make that best for you. So I would say find an expert to guide you through this life. I think that health is something that is probably one of the most important things that we have to carry until we die, but we don't approach it like we would with our finances. I would never tell anyone in here the day that you retire that you should start saving that day. No, we never hear that message, right? We hear you start saving and you start putting into what you want in the end is the same concept that we should look at when we're thinking about our health.
I would say nutrition is the most controversial topic ever. I mean, it's like religion, politics, and then what you're eating, which is kind of funny. Oh yeah, but it's the thing that 100% of people do here. 100% of people eat. Can we say that that's fair? So I actually trained professionally in nutrition for 7 years. So I've trained professionally in nutrition for 7 years and have been lucky to train under one of the world-leading protein experts who still mentors me to this day. And dietary protein, so there's nutrition, which is controversial, and the dietary protein is like the black sheep of the macronutrient family, right? There's, should we be eating plant-based proteins? Should we be eating animal-based proteins? And it is just a chaos-making machine. It doesn't have to be. So I'm gonna lay down some hierarchy of information. And number one, you guys have all heard of the RDA, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, right, for dietary protein. Why am I talking about protein and muscle? There are only 2 ways, largely, to stimulate skeletal muscle when you are done growing. So I have a 3- and 5-year-old kid. They can be anabolic just by running around. But for the rest of us who are not growing up, I say that funny because my husband's not in the room. But anyway, you have to understand that there's only 2 levers you can truly pull. Skeletal muscle adaptation through training has to be done. Dietary protein. You cannot build muscle without dietary protein, period, end of story. So we have these current recommendations that have set us up for an epidemic of frailty, sarcopenia, and metabolic dysfunction as a whole. And we've seen that. So 0.8 grams per kilogram is the minimum to prevent deficiency. That, by definition, is a low protein diet. If you are, I'll give you a calculation, if you weigh 115 pounds, then your recommended amount of protein, if you calculate it's 0.37 grams per pound, then that's around 45 grams of protein per day. That is not going to take you through aging, and that is a minimum to prevent something like kwashiorkor. It is the minimum to prevent a deficiency from an amino acid perspective. How many of you guys just want to go through life in the minimum to prevent a deficiency? Nobody. We've seen what happens. So a more optimal amount of protein would be double that. And that would bring us to 1.6 grams or 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. This would be, by definition, a moderate protein diet or more optimal. Is that enough? That is probably okay, but an individual will probably want to go higher, especially through a menopause transition, especially if you are struggling with any kind of illness, especially if you want to change your body composition. If you want to reduce body fat and you want to increase lean tissue, you're going to train and you're going to improve your dietary protein intake. Period, end of story. And so strategies to do that, and I talk about this all in my book. Again, I've studied this for 20 years. I look good for 25, but I've been studying this for 20 years. Yeah, you know that whole Botox thing? So how can you guys take tangible information so that right after this you can do the right thing for your body? There are certain fundamental principles that whether you are vegetarian or whatever your source of protein is that you are going to take, you're going to be closer to 1 gram per pound ideal body weight. No, there is no danger in going that high. So if I'm 110 pounds and that is my ideal body weight, that is totally fine. If someone in here is 200 pounds and their ideal body weight is 150 pounds, could you have 150 grams of protein and probably have metabolic improvement? Yes. Now, how you are going to think about how you dose protein is a little important here because there's a ton of information out there. The data suggests that that first meal of the day, whenever you have it, is the most important because there are changes that happen along with skeletal muscle that are underappreciated. Skeletal muscle is a nutrient sensing organ. It senses the quality of your diet. And when you have a robust amount of protein at that first meal, anywhere from 40 to 55 grams, that could be 2 scoops of whey protein. It could be a mix of Greek yogurt and whey protein or some eggs, or if you are plant-based, it could be a rice pea blend. It sounds like a lot only because we've been preconditioned that what our dietary, that's a lot of protein. It's not. What you've been conditioned for is the minimum amount. So that first meal of the day will allow your muscle to respond like a younger muscle. It is a way to overcome aging. So 40 to 55 grams at that first meal, and then that same kind of meal before bed, before you're going into an overnight fast. And quite frankly, I don't care about what you do for that middle meal. You should have some protein, and it probably should be balanced if you're having carbohydrates. But if you make those changes, you will protect skeletal muscle mass as you age, and you will be able to change body composition when calories are controlled. Most important thing that I can give you.
So we need to start that today.
Yeah.
So, and also, I will say we talk a lot about goals, but I think that's the wrong word. We have to set standards for how we execute. We don't need goals. You need standards for how you execute and a framework for putting things into place that this is just the kind of person that you are, this is what you do, and this is how you execute. Period.
Awesome. So we're going to open it up to questions.
Yes, lots of questions, please.
Hopefully there's going to be a lot of questions. Dr. Haver.
So we come up with protein.
Oh, sorry.
Some movement. There's, in my clinic, I just take care of menopause, and everyone is very focused on the next 30 years, right? They're not coming in for a bikini body. I mean, if that happened, great, but
That's not true. You guys seen Marriage?
so they are like, look, I'm looking at my mom, I'm looking at my aunts, I'm looking at my genetics and what life has served them. They are not, they want to limit the amount of time that they end up in a long-term care facility. They don't want their children to be burdened with their health care. And they want to know the top things that they can do to lessen those chances. We all know things are out of our control, but what can they do in their control as a menopausal person to decrease that risk?
Decrease the risk of.
Ending up in a
long-term facility from cognitive disorder
Yeah.
or mobility.
I mean, for me, when my patients come in, most of them are not aware of how important it is to incorporate working out and weight training. So I would say that is one, as well as obviously for me as a gynecologist, hormone replacement therapy is something that I touch on a lot as well.
And I would say train like your life depends on it.
Yes.
Because it does.
It does.
And you're not training to become better at exercise. You are training to become better and stronger at life. And that includes functional movements. I mean, at any given day, I've got one kid on a shoulder, I got a kettlebell in the next hand because we're training together. You know?
I think, when we're up here talking, it may look as if we're just talking about weight training to build muscle and to build bulk, but this goes into balance, right?
Yep.
So one of the things you're talking about, long-term care
Yep.
facility is falling.
Yep.
And so your muscles are going to be able to stabilize your body, but also the glucose, that has to do with dementia and how much glucose is around that is going to impact your mind and also losing cognition. So all of these things really wrap together. I think you need to look at your body as one unit and everything connects to another. And so train for your life. Train for your life through weight training in order to impact your muscle, your glucose, your mind, your heart. And that's how you're going to be able to maximize when you get to your 80s and your 90s and even your hundreds in order to prevent how much time am I going to spend in a long-term facility, but how much of the quality of life do I want at that age? Because everyone here can get to 100, but how do you want to live your 100?
And we should also mention cortisol, right? Like doing
Yeah.
things that aren't spiking cortisol, really watching our stress levels, because we know cortisol can lead to inflammation. You know, cortisol slows down all of our growth processes, our metabolism. So really also setting yourself up to be able to manage stress. High cortisol further robs the body of the estrogen you were talking about.
Absolutely. And cortisol, you want really it to be maintained because we're all going to have stress. Stress is not a bad thing. It's what does your body do when you're introduced to a stressful situation. So with muscle, I'm right back to muscle again. With muscle is actually able to maintain the regulation of your cortisol and to keep it at a level where it is not creating this imbalance between your insulin and your glucose balances. So I think that, again, looking at your body as a whole entity rather than just one organ system against the other, that's really going to find holistic and getting everything in tune. Any other questions? Yes, we have one right over here.
I would like to know the panel's opinion on the use of postmenopause testosterone supplementation for the treatment of sarcopenia, specifically in women who have demonstrated low total testosterone levels.
Well, I think to start out, the question is, regardless if it's low or if it's mid or whatever that level is to really look at testosterone as declining in menopause as well. And that, again, is one of those topics that is very controversial because we've focused a lot of menopause and decline in hormones on estrogen. But the fact is all women have testosterone. That, again, is a societal thing where we've been trained that only men have testosterone and women don't. But when you start to see the decline of testosterone throughout perimenopause and menopause, that, again, is where you start to see some of the decline in your ability to build muscle. And so for me, this is, again, personal because a lot of the organizations have not necessarily created an atmosphere where testosterone is revered and looked at in a positive light, is that I do teach my patients that testosterone is very important to that midlife transition in order to impact their cognition. We know that testosterone has a lot to do with the executive functioning of our mind, but also with muscle as well. So the ability for us to utilize, again, our bodies as a whole system, testosterone is one of those features that's going to impact muscle and how we actually prevent lean muscle mass decline. So I am a fan of testosterone supplementation. What about you?
I'm a fan of...
Yes, for testosterone.
Yeah. So sarcopenia actually didn't become a recognizable disease. It didn't get its ICD-10 code until 2016. So that just gives you a perception of where we are, defined as decreased muscle mass and strength. A physician could easily demonstrate low muscle mass and provide testosterone. I also don't think that you have to wait until you are postmenopausal and sarcopenic to begin testosterone replacement therapy. I think that I know that the evidence is there. Yeah.
And I think that our bodies, when we think of hormones, they're chemical messengers. This is what they all talk to another and they all function. So I would never take my car to a car shop and say, oh, hey, I'm gonna wait till all the oil is out. I know you said it was a little low. I'm gonna drive it away and wait till it's completely out, and then I'll come back when it's empty. So why do we do that with our bodies, which are the most important part of who we are? So I think that, like, just to go to your point, and why would we wait till postmenopausal till it's depleted and being like, you know what, I'm address that testosterone and estrogen now. No, let's start to address it as it's starting to decline, to give our bodies the best ability to rise to the occasion.
Yes. Can you speak to the probability that a woman that takes testosterone supplementation in midlife and starts a weightlifting program, that they will or will not become manly and all these other things? I talk, a lot of my clients are always, they believe
We're still waiting for that to happen.
And we're also still waiting for women to become
big.
bulky. If that's going to happen, like,
Yeah,
what are the
no.
scientific things? How can that occur?
Well, I would say it can if someone was going to do specific things, which most people are not going to do those things to get them to that level. I think most of my patients, when they walk in and I, say, I think that testosterone would be great for you, most of them focus on, am I going to get a beard? Am I going to get really, really bulky? Again, that has to do with society. What society has trained us to believe that testosterone equals this. And so we would really have to take a lot of testosterone. Do you know the amount that we have to take? Because I tell my patients, if you walk in the next visit with a beard, then we need to talk. But I would say that most patients really needed it anyway, so I would never give them an amount that would take them to look like a bodybuilder with a beard. I mean, that would take a significant amount of testosterone. So that comes with education. I think really the answer is how we educate women in understanding what they already have and what we're trying to accomplish, rather than they never had it and now I'm giving you this obscure thing that you were never exposed to. I think that's where kind of maybe the mismatch comes.
So with muscle mass and muscle health, can you speak about the relationship between the health of the muscle as we get older from the neck up cognitively, like brain health, kind of pulling off of her question about longevity and aging smart and intelligent and being smart, and not declining. How does muscle health help from the neck up as well as the neck down?
Yeah, there's a few ways, and I actually did a fellowship in geriatrics, so that was part of my research as a postdoc, and we looked at body composition and brain function, and the better someone's body composition was, meaning the more muscle mass they had, the lower body fat they had, the better the brain volume they actually had. And so we see this on fMRI studies, and now there's, a good friend, Dr. Tommy Wood, has been publishing some research about this. So we know that when it comes to something like Alzheimer's, dementia, and even mild cognitive impairment, that body composition plays a role. The other thing that exercise does is exercise is a endocrine organ, and it secretes these myokines. And through exercise, there's hundreds of different myokines, but capsaicin and irisin actually impact the brain to produce more BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor within the brain, and that helps with neurogenesis. And the more intense, and the other thing is with myokines, there is a direct relation to the intensity and duration of training. So intensity and duration. A lot of people don't have a ton of time to train. Get in there. I guarantee you can gas yourself in 10 minutes. Mary Claire and I are going to be doing that. Maybe Dr. Callie Capperson too.
I think we're out of time.
Oh, no, we're not. That says 100 minutes left.
Okay, I'm trying to honor the next panel, but phenomenal information. Oh my gosh, so inspiring.